What kind of father kills his own daughter, his flesh and blood? Oh my gosh, this is another heartbreaking true crime story. A story of a young woman with so much potential, taken from this world far too soon. What really happened to 22-year-old Kailee McMullen on that fateful morning in June 2017? Was it a tragic accident, or was there something more horrifying behind the closed doors of her family home? Stay with us as we piece together the events that led to her untimely death and the shocking allegations that would leave an entire community shaken. Kailee Jo McMullen had a life most people would envy. A talented cheerleader, she had traveled the country competing at the highest levels of her sport. She was a dedicated student, a hard worker, and a compassionate soul who had a passion for helping others. Her bubbly personality and infectious sense of humor made her a joy to be around. But on the morning of June 29, 2017, everything came to a halt. What began as an ordinary day quickly turned into a nightmare for her family and friends. Today, we'll take you step by step through Kailee's story, her bright beginnings, her struggles, and the details of her final moments. As we move on, we'll examine the conflicting accounts, the evidence found at the scene, and the testimony of those closest to her. Could it really have been a tragic act of despair, or did someone close to her have something to hide? How does a seemingly loving father become the prime suspect in his own daughter's death? Let's find out together, but before we do that, tell us, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. Kailee Jo McMullen was born on December 20, 1994, in Norman, Oklahoma, to Ronnie and Karen McMullen. From the very start, Kailee was the kind of child who lit up every room she entered. By the time she was just 8 years old, she had already discovered her calling. Cheerleading quickly became more than a hobby, it became a passion that shaped her formative years. She joined the Oklahoma Twisters All-Stars and competed on stages across the nation, even making it to the prestigious Cheerleading Worlds competition in Orlando, Florida. Her dedication to the sport was unmatched. In high school, Kailee's talent and leadership shone brightly. She joined the Norman North High School cheerleading team and rose to become the varsity co-captain during her senior year. Under her guidance, the squad clinched the 6A state title in 2012 to 2013. Kailee wasn't just a cheerleader, she was a driving force, inspiring her teammates to give their best on and off the mat. Kailee wasn't just defined by her accomplishments, her personality was equally magnetic. Friends and family often described her as the life of the party. She had a quick wit and a quirky sense of humor that left people in stitches. Kailee loved entertaining others, whether by telling a joke, putting together elaborate costumes, or creating a moment of joy when it was least expected. Her love for animals was another defining part of her life. Over the years, she cared for a menagerie of pets, from her beloved tricolor border collie, Mackie, to Jack the pug, Shady the cat, and even hermit crabs, mice, and rats. Each animal was a testament to her nurturing spirit and compassion. It wasn't just animals Kailee cared about, her faith was a cornerstone of her life. Growing up, she attended Goodrich Memorial United Methodist Church, where her faith provided her with strength and purpose. Kailee's joy for life extended into the smallest details. Her love for music knew no boundaries, she enjoyed everything from country to pop to rock. Friends often recalled her breaking into song, making even mundane moments feel magical. Her costumes were legendary, she didn't just dress up for an event, she transformed herself, always finding a way to make people laugh or admire her creativity. And she wasn't afraid to share her joy with everyone around her. Whether it was a friend going through a tough time or a stranger in need of a smile, Kailee always had the ability to lift others up. As Kailee transitioned into adulthood, her passion for helping others became her mission. She briefly attended Bible College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a time that further strengthened her faith and gave her a sense of purpose. When she returned to Norman, she didn't slow down. Kailee earned her EMT certification, a testament to her dedication to making a difference in the lives of others. She went on to work at CSL Plasma and with Norman Regional EMSSTAT, where she provided care and support to those in need. Kailee's career wasn't just a job, it was a reflection of her deep-seated desire to serve others. Kailee's life was a remarkable blend of achievement, joy, and compassion. Her story should have been one of continued success and fulfillment. Instead, her life was tragically cut short, leaving behind a void that her family, friends, and community still feel to this day. Kailee McMullen's relationship with her father was marred by a series of troubling allegations that painted a picture of a home filled with fear and control. Friends and her ex-boyfriend revealed that Kailee had confided in them about a history of physical and sexual abuse at the hands of her father, Ronnie McMullen. These were not passing accusations but deeply personal accounts she shared during moments of vulnerability. They described a young woman grappling with trauma too heavy for anyone, let alone someone her age, to endure. One friend recalled Kailee breaking down as she recounted incidents that left her feeling powerless. She described nights of fear, times when her father's temper turned violent, and moments when she felt completely isolated from any form of help. According to those close to her, the alleged abuse wasn't just physical but deeply psychological, a toxic mix that left Kailee questioning her own worth and her ability to trust others. Perhaps the most telling moment came during an argument in April 2017. Witnesses reported that during a heated confrontation, Ronnie allegedly slapped Kailee so hard that her nose bled. The tension in the household escalated to such an extent that Kailee's mother, Karen, intervened in a desperate attempt to protect her daughter. Karen allegedly grabbed a gun and pointed it at Ronnie, creating a scene that underscored the volatile dynamics within the family. This wasn't a moment of anger, it was a culmination of years of unresolved tension and conflict. Kailee wore a bright smile and carried an infectious energy that could light up a room, but behind her cheerful demeanor lay a lifetime of unspoken pain. Her bubbly personality was her armor, a way to deflect attention from the wounds she carried within. Despite her outward optimism, Kailee struggled deeply with the trauma of her past. Those closest to her noted how she often masked her pain with humor. Her quick wit and charm made her the life of any gathering, but when the laughter faded, the emotional toll of her upbringing became apparent. Kailee confided in her close circle of friends about the abuse she endured, describing moments of helplessness and fear. Her words revealed a young woman torn between the love she wanted to feel for her family and the reality of her experiences. This emotional burden began to take a toll on her relationships. Kailee found it difficult to fully open up to people, even those she cared for deeply. She feared judgment and rejection, worried that sharing the full extent of her story might push others away. Her mental health also became a concern for her friends, who noticed signs of anxiety and emotional exhaustion. If you're moved by Kailee's story, don't turn away now. Her life mattered. Her justice matters. Subscribe to our channel to keep her memory alive, and share her story with others who need to know. Don't let this tragic injustice be forgotten. Subscribe now, and make sure Kailee's voice is heard. Despite these struggles, Kailee clung to her faith. Her spirituality was a cornerstone of her life, offering her a sense of hope and purpose even in her darkest moments. She prayed often, seeking strength and clarity as she navigated the challenges before her. Her faith became a refuge, a place where she could find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos of her reality. The events of April 2017 marked a turning point in Kailee's story, one that foreshadowed the tragedy that would later unfold. In the weeks leading up to her death, Kailee made a desperate phone call to her ex-boyfriend, Paul Sargent. Paul later described the conversation as one of the most heart-wrenching moments of his life. Kailee was in tears, her voice trembling as she spoke about the latest argument with her father. She described the escalating tension at home, the violence that seemed to erupt without warning, and the unbearable weight of living in a household rife with conflict. Kailee told Paul she felt trapped, like there was no escape from the turmoil that surrounded her. She also mentioned the incident where her mother had intervened with a gun, a chilling reminder of how far things had spiraled out of control. Friends who spent time with Kailee during this period described her as a woman on edge, someone who was trying her best to hold it all together but was clearly struggling. Her laughter seemed forced at times, her smile strained. There were moments when her eyes betrayed a sadness that words could never fully capture. These signs were all there, moments of vulnerability, cries for help, and indications that the pressure was becoming too much. Yet, despite the warnings, no one could have predicted the devastating outcome that awaited Kailee and her family. The events leading up to her death remain a reminder of the unresolved pain and turmoil that defined her final days. On June 29, 2017, at 5:45 a.m., a phone call came into 911 that would forever change the lives of the McMullen family. The voice on the other end was Ronald McMullen, a man in a state of panic. He spoke in a broken, distressed voice, his words hurried and filled with confusion. He told the dispatcher that his daughter, Kailee, had shot herself. "She's gone," he cried, "she's not breathing." His desperation was palpable as he repeated, "I don't know what to do." In the background, another voice could be heard, this time a woman's voice, calling out in disbelief, "Oh, my God." Ronald told the dispatcher that his wife, Karen, had arrived and was attempting to perform CPR on Kailee, even though Kailee was already unresponsive. What should have been a moment of clarity for a father trying to save his daughter instead raised more questions than it answered. The situation grew even more perplexing when Ronald mentioned he had moved Kailee's body from where it originally was. This simple statement would later become a point of contention in the investigation. Why had he moved her? Had he been trying to alter the crime scene or hide evidence? As police would later uncover, Ronald's actions on that fateful morning seemed more like the behavior of a man trying to cover his tracks rather than one who had witnessed a tragic accident. When police arrived at the McMullen home, they were greeted with a scene that didn't align with Ronald's story. Kailee was found dead in the entryway of the house, her body surrounded by blood. The presence of a blood-covered .357 caliber revolver sitting on a nearby side table immediately raised suspicions. Ronald's actions during the moments following Kailee's death only served to deepen the mystery. Officers observed Ronald covered in blood, yet he repeatedly tried to wipe it off, even though the blood on his clothing was not from him. His behavior appeared inconsistent with someone who had just discovered his daughter in a state of life-threatening distress. Despite being instructed not to wipe the blood away, Ronald continued to do so, even attempting to clean the floor and his own body with a towel. At one point, officers had to physically restrain him to stop his obsessive actions. This strange behavior raised immediate red flags. Was he trying to destroy evidence? Was he trying to create the illusion of a tragic accident? Ronald's repeated requests to wipe off the blood seemed to defy logic, especially in the face of the crisis at hand. The situation grew even more bizarre when Ronald was seen later in the yard, lying down in the dirt and rubbing himself with the dirt. What was going on in his mind? Was he trying to cleanse himself of guilt, or was it another form of cover-up? His behavior only grew more unsettling as officers struggled to understand what they were dealing with. Ronald's version of events, that Kailee had taken her own life, was soon called into question by the evidence gathered at the crime scene. The blood-covered revolver found on the side table was a key piece of evidence, yet its placement suggested that it had been moved, not left in a position that would make sense for a suicide. For one, Kailee was found on her back, with blood pooling around her head from the gunshot wound. If she had shot herself in such a manner, why was the revolver found in an odd position, far from where the injury occurred? Further complicating matters were Ronald's contradictory statements. He told the police that Kailee had shot herself, yet he couldn't explain where the gun was when they first arrived. He claimed not to know, despite the fact that it was clear he was in the house when the shooting occurred. His uncertainty, combined with his strange behavior, only intensified the suspicions surrounding the case. As police began their investigation, the details seemed to align with a darker scenario than Ronald's explanation of a tragic accident. Kailee's injuries, the positioning of the gun, and Ronald's strange actions all pointed towards something far more disturbing than a self-inflicted wound. As the investigation into Kailee McMullen's tragic death unfolded, disturbing allegations about her father's behavior started to surface. Friends of Kailee came forward with testimonies about Ronald McMullen's controlling and abusive actions toward his daughter. They revealed that Kailee had confided in them on several occasions about the years of mistreatment she endured under his roof. These stories painted a picture of a father who had crossed boundaries that no parent should ever cross. Allegations of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, and even sexual misconduct were brought to light. Despite these allegations, the authorities had never filed charges. Investigations had been conducted into the McMullen household on more than one occasion, yet, for reasons unknown, the cases were never brought to court. What had been swept under the rug? Why was this abuse allowed to continue unchecked? Kailee's friends couldn't understand why the system had failed her, why no one had intervened before it was too late. Was there a pattern of disregard for Kailee's cries for help? Were there missed opportunities for intervention, or was it simply a case of abuse that had gone unnoticed and unaddressed? As the case moved to trial, the courtroom became a stage for a dramatic unraveling of the McMullen family's dark secrets. One by one, witnesses came forward to share what they knew about Kailee's life leading up to her death. Her childhood friends described her as someone who had suffered in silence, someone who had learned to live in fear of her father's temper. They spoke about the times Kailee had opened up to them about the abuse she had experienced, including a horrifying incident in which Ronald had slapped her so hard that it caused her nose to bleed. Her ex-boyfriend, Paul Sargent, also testified, recounting a heartbreaking phone call he had received from Kailee in April 2017. She had been crying, telling him about a confrontation between her parents in which her mother had pointed a gun at her father to protect her. Kailee had also shared that her father had tried to touch her inappropriately during the night while they were all in bed together. This was a moment that would forever haunt Sargent, who could only listen helplessly as Kailee described the horrors she had been forced to endure in her own home. Perhaps the most shocking testimony came from Kailee's mother, Karen McMullen. Despite the overwhelming evidence of her husband's abusive behavior, Karen stood by Ronald's side throughout the trial. She denied the allegations of abuse, defending her husband and insisting that nothing had happened between him and their daughter. Her testimony was filled with contradictions and emotional denial, as she maintained that she never believed her husband was capable of harming Kailee. This left many in the courtroom stunned. How could a mother deny the suffering of her own daughter? Why would she continue to protect a man accused of such unspeakable acts? Expert witnesses were brought in to analyze Ronald's behavior during the investigation and trial. These experts pointed out several red flags that contradicted Ronald's version of events. They discussed the strange and erratic behavior he exhibited after the shooting, his obsessive wiping of the blood, his odd actions in the yard, and his inconsistent statements to the police. These behaviors were seen as highly abnormal for someone who had just discovered their child in distress. The experts explained that Ronald's actions did not align with those of a grieving father, but rather someone who was deeply involved in the tragic events leading up to his daughter's death. In addition to expert testimony, the prosecution highlighted Ronald's history of controlling behavior. His relationship with Kailee was described as suffocating, with no room for independence or freedom. Several witnesses testified that Ronald had been manipulative and dominant over his family, enforcing strict rules and maintaining a tight grip on Kailee's life. This dynamic had created a toxic environment where Kailee felt trapped and unable to escape. Ronald had always been in control, even to the point where he felt entitled to violate his daughter's boundaries. As the trial progressed, some key questions began to emerge. First, why didn't Kailee's mother, Karen McMullen, believe the allegations of abuse? How could a mother continue to defend a man accused of harming her daughter? Was it denial, fear, or a refusal to accept the truth? Her support for Ronald throughout the trial left many in the courtroom grappling with the depths of her emotional turmoil and the devastating choices she made. Second, could Kailee's death have been prevented? If the signs of abuse had been taken more seriously, if the systems in place had acted sooner, could Kailee still be alive today? Kailee had confided in her friends, but no one had been able to stop the cycle of abuse in time. Her death left many people asking, how many other victims of abuse are suffering in silence? Could there have been more done to intervene, to save her, before it was too late? The aftermath of Kailee McMullen's tragic death reverberated through her family and the community in ways that no one could have anticipated. For Kailee's mother, Karen McMullen, the weight of the events that unfolded became unbearable. Despite her unwavering support for her husband throughout the trial, Karen found herself grappling with the traumatic reality of the situation. She was left torn between the man she had married and the daughter she had lost, struggling with the complexity of her emotions. Karen was later diagnosed with PTSD, a condition that came as a direct result of the abuse she had either turned a blind eye to or failed to fully recognize until it was too late. The public scrutiny that followed only added to her pain. Karen's role in defending Ronald, despite the allegations against him, led to harsh judgment from the community. The questions and accusations were relentless. How could she have allowed this to happen? Why hadn't she stepped forward to protect her daughter? The media and the people who once supported her family now turned their attention on Karen, amplifying the shame and guilt she carried. How much responsibility did she bear in all of this? Was she complicit in her daughter's abuse, or was she a victim herself, caught in a web of denial and fear? Meanwhile, the man at the center of it all, Ronald McMullen, was facing the consequences of his actions. After being arrested and charged with Kailee's death, Ronald's trial continued to unfold in the courts. His defense team maintained that Kailee's death was a tragic accident, a claim that was met with skepticism by many who had followed the case. Ronald's erratic behavior, his conflicting statements, and the overwhelming evidence against him painted a different picture. After a long and emotional trial, Ronald McMullen was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of his daughter, Kailee McMullen. His actions have forever altered the course of her life and devastated the family she left behind. The sentencing, while bringing some closure to Kailee's case, does little to ease the pain of her loved ones who continue to mourn her loss. As he faces the consequences of his horrific crime, the community, especially those who knew Kailee, are left to grapple with the reality of the tragedy that unfolded in their midst. While the case surrounding Kailee's death remains complicated and heartbreaking, her legacy continues to live on. Kailee may have been silenced too soon, but the impact she had on those around her cannot be erased. In the years following her death, Kailee's friends and family have worked tirelessly to preserve her memory. They've created scholarships in her name, raised awareness about domestic abuse, and continued to share the story of the young woman who had such a promising future ahead of her. Kailee's legacy is not defined by the pain of her death, but by the joys she brought to those who knew her. Her passion for helping others, her love for animals, and her bright spirit left an indelible mark on everyone who crossed her path. Though her life was tragically cut short, Kailee McMullen's story serves as a reminder of the importance of speaking out against abuse, standing up for those who cannot defend themselves, and cherishing the people we love while we still have the chance. This case, though heartbreaking, is a call to action. We must continue to shine a light on the victims of abuse, raise awareness, and support efforts to end the cycle of violence. It's crucial that we, as a society, stand together to ensure that the voices of the voiceless are heard and that justice prevails. What are your thoughts on the role of her family in this tragedy? Were they victims too, or should they have done more? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to hear your opinions and theories on this case. If you found Kailee's story compelling and want to help spread awareness, don't forget to like and share this video. Let's ensure that her story is heard far and wide. And if you want to keep up with more gripping true crime stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Your thoughts and comments are important to us, so please take a moment to share your insights. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more true crime documentaries.